Okay, this is part 3. It's another day. I'm going to finish up the Q&A here. This next question is from Rithorindel. This is probably going to take the whole this whole video answering this question, because he actually had 2 questions, and the last one is 3 parts. So, and I want to take my time with this. So Rithorindel asks, number 1, could some sort of atavistic genes from one of our ancestors have been reactivated in Nick? Would this explain his stupidity? Completely by coincidence, I'm actually going to be doing a video on a similar topic to that, actually. So, why don't we? You'll see once I get set up in my place and everything like that. I'll get that video out. So we'll get to it. But number 2, this is interesting. He said, what are the A, grossest, B, weirdest, and C, scariest creatures you have become aware of as a result of your biology studies, etc.? Pictures are encouraged. Now this is a great question. So I'm going to start. The grossest. I'm keeping it to things that I personally have worked with, rather than stuff that I've heard of. So the grossest thing, I'm a huge fan of parasites. I love parasites, biologically, obviously, not on me, in me, around me. But I'm fascinated by the whole concept of parasitism. So parasites generally, well, they can actually go through all 3 categories, but I'm just going to start off with the grossest. There is a parasitic barnacle called a rhizocephalin. The ones that we have up here in Alaska is Briarosaccus colosus is one of the common species. Anyway, these Peltogastrel is another one that gets in hermit crabs. But these are so amazing because I don't know if you're aware, but okay, typical barnacle. They start off as microscopic, well, close to microscopic larvae that float in the water, and then when it's time, they metamorphose into the adult form, which, if you know, a barnacle is attached to a rock. So they'll settle down, find a rock, glue their heads to the rock, and then molt into a miniature version of the adults. These barnacles, however, don't do that. What these barnacles do, they're parasites. So instead of, they actually attach to the outside, there's some variation within them. There's hundreds of species in this group, and they all are pretty host specific, meaning they'll attack usually one species of crustacean. Other ones are more generalists. Some of them are really, really specific. Anyway, so they do different things. But they molt into this form called the kentrogon, which is almost like a turtle shell. It's a flat thing that attaches to the shell, and then either they'll enter through a hole, where the hairs come out of the crab, or they'll make their own hole through the crab's shell, and then they actually get rid of their exoskeleton altogether, and they squirt their cells inside the kentrogon, like a syringe squeezes all of its cells, loose cells, inside the crab, where they travel through the bloodstream to the central nervous system, and then they start growing tendrils out that infiltrate every major organ system in the crab. From that point on, once the crab's infected, in some species that have been studied, like the blue crab on the East Coast, they change their diet, they change their habits, they don't behave like a typical crab anymore. They just change. But the cool thing is, at least in a number of species, they infect male crabs, and they actually will digest the testes of the male crab, removing them completely. And then, in place of them, they grow their own ovaries, because these barnacles are all female. The infectious ones are all female. The males actually parasitize the females, which is weird. It's called hyperparasitism. That's a whole different story. So anyway, these they grow their ovaries where the crab's testes used to be, and then they secrete a hormone, and I forget the name of it now. Anyway, but it changes the crab superficially, changes the crab into a female. So next time the crab molts, it molts off its external male characteristics, the way the abdomen's shaped and such, and adopts the female characteristics. Because then when the barnacle's ready to reproduce, the eggs the larvae of the barnacle are extruded in the abdomen of the crab, and the crab will mother them just like it would do if it was a female crab taking care of its own eggs. It's really bizarre. It's in many ways, it's as if once the crab gets infected, the crab is essentially killed. It's almost like this barnacle is running some kind of a, basically kills the crab and then just takes over its central nervous system and becomes a crab. I don't know. Anyway, but the coolest thing is that when the barnacle's eggs, when the larvae are ripe and ready to go out and be infectious again, the barnacle secretes a pseudo-mating hormone that travels for miles around, and all male crabs in the region cluster around this supposed female, and then the sac opens up and infects all of the crabs around it. So it's this pretty devastating parasite. It's pretty gross. Let's see here. The weirdest. I took all my time up with that one. The weirdest, I have to say, is the flying assholes. We encountered these when I was doing a deep sea project in the Gulf of Mexico, using an ROV, deep sea ROV, down to 6,000 feet, 6,500 feet, and the crew they did a lot of oil pipeline stuff. These weren't scientists; these were the boat crew, great bunch of guys, and they were telling us about what do we know about the flying assholes? What's a flying asshole? And then when we got deep enough and we saw these, what they are is they're a sea cucumber called an elasmopodid. Most sea cucumbers live on the bottom and actually ingest mud. Well, these sea cucumbers don't live on the bottom; they actually live in the water column, so they're suspended above the bottom, and they do so by having these. They have wings. They look like stereotypical angel wings. They're like coming out of the sides, and they just are flapping, slowly flapping, keeping themselves up. They're kind of a square-bodied animal, and right in the center of the body is this giant, crinkly anus, right in the middle of it. Just giant anus. And what they do is they go down to the bottom, they fly down to the bottom, they eat mud, their mouths are on the underside, they fill up with mud, and then they go back in the water column, digest, and then periodically this anus opens up and these big giant turds fall out of it. And I looked at it and I was like, that is a flying asshole. There's no better word to describe it that I've ever seen. I had, I'll at some point in time I have some video footage it's on my other computer. I have video of the flying assholes. You have to see them. If I can find a link, I'll put a link up in the sidebar. There's a lot of these things have been put. If you want to just do a search for deep sea cucumbers or deep water cucumbers, there's a lot of video. They're pretty amazing. Okay, let's see here. I got just 2 minutes left or so. So, the scariest creatures. Well, I'm going to show you this picture right here. These pictures. Okay, those are a giant isopod called Bathynomus giganteus. These, on the same deep sea cruise I was talking about the last time, these are literally related, the same order of crustacea that roly-polies, the terrestrial isopods, roly-polies or stowbugs, pillbugs belong to, same group, except these are the world's largest species in that group. They'll be over 35 centimeters long. I think we got one probably close to that size, our largest one. That one picture with them around the Doritos bag I took. There's a story behind that. It was my poor attempt at humor on the ship, but that actually circulated around. I've actually had people notify me, hey, your picture's posted on this website or that website. If you do a search for Bathynomus, that picture will come up. And numbers of people have claimed to have taken it. In fact, there's one guy on, I think it was on Lowcats, claimed that he made it with Photoshop. And it's like, you didn't make that with Photoshop. I took that picture, asshole. Anyway, but so those are certainly the scariest. They're actually scavengers. So if you fall off a ship and sink to the bottom in the deep ocean, this is one of the things that's going to eat you. They're designed. I don't mean that in a religious sense. I mean, they starve. They probably don't eat maybe once every 6 months, and like a dead whale or a carcass in the bottom, and then they can gorge themselves to the point where they'll be cylindrical. Their whole abdomen swells outward, and they become immobilized. So they're just made to eat as much as they can stuff. Their entire gut, I've dissected them before, and they're from the head all the way down to the tail is just one giant stomach. It's just huge. It's really, really cool. Anyway, so I will talk to you later. I'll do part 4.